Peace and overstanding. Good morning, good afternoon, whenever you're watching this video. Number one, we have corrected the textbook scenario. If you go to Moodle, you will see it says Johnson's ebook. Brightwave has been replaced with Inspire. And if you click on that link, there is a instructions rather, on how to operate the ebook. So with that being said, you have some questions that have been assigned with chapter 1. Still had some technical issues with that last video I was attempting to upload. I'm not really sure what happened with that. So, but since you have access now to the textbook, we will be able to move past chapter 1. And again, you can be abreast of where we are. Again, it is your responsibility to be cognizant of when things are due. Students are, again, contacting me about assignments being late or not being cognizant of the time frame. I have allowed it to be turned in for less points, but this scenario will not continue. If your work is late and extremely late, and if it's not a valid reason other than I didn't know or I didn't see it, that's not what we're doing. So with that being said, we're going to move forward. So you have the textbook. It's there. You had those questions that go with chapter 1 that are there, and we're gonna get it straight. Your professor had been having some transportation issues, so that's been challenging with getting back and forth to campus. So you know how that goes when you need a ride. So, but at any rate, for my 2 o'clock class, we went into chapter 2. So this lecture is basically for that section. Now, you can still watch it. It's always legal for you to watch it, but we want to just kind of continue into what we were doing with that when we last met. And we went into chapter 2, guys, for the 2 o'clock class, and I'm going to come back because we're all going to pick up the other classes with the beginning of chapter 1. So you can watch this portion of the video as well and read the beginning parts and catch up. Or we're going to go back to it because we will be meeting tomorrow, Friday. So in my 2 o'clock class, we left off with talking about more advanced and diverse creation of civilizations through the advent of writing, moving from pictograms to the creation of an alphabet, which helped in the aiding of a speaking language, a recordable phonetic language with the advent and creation of letters and pronunciations. This is a very important time frame for mankind, the development of a spoken written language and transitioning from pictograms and symbols that meant a particular phrase or thing or concept to a written word. Although it's still more to that with a written language and translation in languages, but this is a beginning. And we talked about the rule of law. We talked about, in the beginning chapter, Hammurabi's Code, which was one of the first established civil and criminal laws that protected defamation of character, slander, criminal crimes, murder, stealing, slavery, and all of the above. We talked about that. So now I mentioned also earlier, we talked about, I gave 4 particular areas that we would look at: the Hebrews, the Egyptians, the Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq, and Palestine, Israel, if you will, which is basically the same place, and that's why those wars are occurring. But we want to talk about Egypt and where they fit at in the scheme of things. Not going to go into a whole lot of, because I'm seeing that these videos typically, if they're too long, I'm having issues with posting them without going back and editing that. So we want to talk a little bit about the Nile. Herodotus, the Greek historian, Herodotus, 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 was a Greek historian who went about and traveled to different places. And this is who the Greeks looked to for explanations about things outside of their boundaries. Herodotus was one of the known Greek historians who went out and traveled, and he was welcome into these different places that he went, talked to people, observed their culture, and he noticed that Egypt is called the gift of the Nile because where it is situated, Kemet, or Egypt, is in an area that the Nile River runs through, just like the Mississippi River runs through Louisiana. The Nile ran through there, and it was very lush and provided great vegetation. So I just also alluded to Egypt, the name. The Greeks used that name, Aegyptos, and called that Egypt. However, the individuals that lived there called their homeland Kemet, K-E-M-E-T, Kemet. Kemet means land of the blacks. This is a whole nother talk show, and those of you that may watch the History Channel and see that when they talk about the wonders of Egypt, the Sphinx and the building of the pyramids and all these astronomical accomplishments that have occurred over time, you will see that they will go to ancient extraterrestrial astronauts theories that takes away from the contributions of blacks as a whole. They would rather say that astronauts or aliens built these monumental structures instead of black people. That aliens came and gave this supreme wisdom, supreme knowledge, supreme mathematics to the people of the early inhabitants. Okay? But Herodotus again noticed that how the flooding of the Nile helped in the development of this great civilization. And again, I want you to always keep in the forefront of your mind the 9 areas of human interaction. What are they? You should know them by now. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, sex, religion, and warfare. So when we go into these kingdoms and these societies, those are the things we want to take away. we want to look at their economics, how they did things. So we know that Egypt was an area that was obviously lush with vegetation from the flooding of the Nile River to the adjacent of the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, and the Nile River runs through this area. Now, oddly enough, the Nile River is the only river that runs where Lower Egypt was, Lower Kemet is at the top and Upper is at the bottom due to the direction in which the river flowed. Oddly enough, we look at the Mississippi River flows down into the Gulf. So the upper Mississippi would be, for those of you that didn't know, the Mississippi River goes all the way into Minnesota, up north, and it flows downward into the Gulf. But the Nile River flows upward, so it's transverse. So Lower Kemet or Egypt is in the north, and Upper is in the south. Okay, that's important. So you have several periods of time framing, and this is just an introduction, but you have the Archaic period, which is the older or first period. You have the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and the New Kingdom, which are time periods of pharaohic leadership. Egypt had 27 pharaohic dynasties. A dynasty is where a particular family rules. We can tie that into politics from the 9 areas. A dynasty is a family, a ruling family, just like with in England, the King of England, the Queen of England. That is the lineage of a family. It's a monarchy. So these different kingdoms, old, middle, and new, there are personalities that arose and accomplishments that arose from this time frame. Now, Egypt is a very interesting subject matter with a lot of diverse topics. Let's first look at politics. The leader or the ruler of Egypt is called the pharaoh. The pharaoh is a term that means great house. It is believed that the pharaoh was the god king, half God and half man. And we talked about in the other lecture how the Homo sapiens began to develop stories or tales about phenomenon in a way to explain, natural phenomenon in a way to explain, and attributed divine powers to sun, moon, stars, and things that were occurring in nature to explain what was happening. This was no different than the ancient Egyptians or the Kemites. But the Kemites the Egyptians have a leader, the pharaoh. And in the religious structure of the Egyptians, you have the pantheon of gods, which Egypt has a creation myth, how the earth in the beginning. Every society has, again, 9 areas of human interaction. Every society has a creation story or a myth. But we want to look at here briefly, just to kind of introduce this to you. I want you to go and familiarize yourselves with the Egyptian gods. It's diversity in that and some of their roles. We're going to talk more in detail about the pharaoh, what that meant, what his responsibilities were. We're going to look at the Old Kingdom, the New Kingdom, and how certain people over time have invaded, as in within all societies, have invaded and thereby changed the phenotype of the land that they invaded. For example, once upon a time, the Native Americans were here in America. Over time, the skin color and the dimensions of the people through miscegenation, intermixing of foreigners and the original people of a land will bring about a new phenotype, a new color of people. So over time, the people that were the original inhabitants of Egypt, their skin color changed, their hue changed over time. So we want to look at that. We're going to talk a little more in detail about this, but everybody knows about the contribution of the Egyptians. King Tut has to be one of the more famous finds that have been discovered. Also, we talk about biblically King Ramses, and there's a story in the Bible that alludes to how the Egyptians, the Hebrews, were kept in bondage in Egypt for X number of years. And we all know the astronomical story of the plagues that were rained down on Egypt, and Moses' story and how the Red Sea parted and Moses was allowed to walk through the water to the other side. So that's another story too, but it's there in the textbook. So again, ancient Egypt, we're really going to go deep into that. We're going to talk about the Hittites in a little more, and we're going to talk about King Tut, a list of pharaohs. We're going to talk about Nubia, Cush, and Kemet. Those are the three names of Egypt, Ethiopia, and Sudan. And Ethiopia, Cush, the word Ethiop actually means burnt-faced people. This is another position which shows you how extremely dark the original inhabitants were of these areas as opposed to how they are now. So we will look at that more. We're going to talk about the Hittites in a little more detail, but I want to talk a little bit about the Hebrews and their belief system coming out. The Hebrews, who have their premise or belief in Yahweh, and they believe that they are in covenant with God. We've heard the term God's chosen people and things of that sort. So we will be definitely looking at what those things mean, how they felt that they entered into a relationship with God through Abraham, who is considered to be the first Hebrew, on through Moses, who is considered the liberator from the exodus of the children of Israel or children of God from Egypt, and then ultimately up until Jesus of Nazareth, who is also considered to be a Hebrew or considered to be Jewish. Jewish is a religion and Hebrew is a people. So we will talk more about that, give you a little more detail about that, but I want you to look at these Egyptian gods, the role of the pharaoh. I want you to look at what was the common everyday life like for an Egyptian. What were their occupations? We want to look at what the Egyptians looked at for entertainment. What types of educational processes did the Egyptians have? And we have the library at Alexandria. So we know from this culture, the Egyptians held education in their high esteem because they had a great and phenomenal library that alluded to great undertakings from medical to architectural warfare, a diverse plethora of knowledge in the library at Alexandria, which was ultimately destroyed. Hundreds of scrolls of information gone from antiquity, lost forever. So we know that they put precedence on education. Not all societies put precedence on learning. Not all societies put pressure and insight on education. But I want to look more into the pharaohs, their lineages, and we definitely want to look at what did the Egyptians believe about religion. And in closing, I want to say that the Egyptians were the first to believe in the concept of the judgment of the soul and afterlife and a concept of heaven and hell. There was no other religion at the time in antiquity, except coming out of Africa, that talked about or alluded to man's soul after his physical body is discarded, that he has a soul or a spirit that will be judged. And we're going to talk about the 48 laws of Mayat, the judgment of the soul, and what that looks like more in depth in class. Something else I'm leaving out. So again, I will have an assignment posted or some notes posted about the Egyptians, the pharaohs, the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and New Kingdom, Upper and Lower Kemet, how that became unified, the Hebrews, what that looks like. We talked about Hammurabi and the Mesopotamians, and I'm going to introduce and tell you what happened with these people that invaded Egypt. So in closing, always investigate the information you receive. If it is indeed the truth, it should stand the test of investigation. I will be on the computer answering and responding to emails. If anyone needs to contact me, you can do so. Peace, and I will see you soon.